Hi, welcome on one of the first summer days in London in 2022, and behind me there, can you see, is Hampton Court Palace, which was built by Cardinal Wolsey but taken off him by King Henry VIII and turned into his palace. This palace is a survivor, a 500-year-old Tudor glory begun by Cardinal Wolsey, advisor to King Henry VIII, and then continued by the king when he relieved the cardinal of his own palace after Wolsey fell from favour. It's a royal palace, which means that it's now the property of the new king, Charles III, but he doesn't own it as his personal property. Instead, it's held in trust for the next monarch. That's because since 1737, the monarchs abandoned it as a royal residence. King George II moved the centre of royal operations to Kensington Palace. Cardinal Wolsey strove to create a Renaissance palace, and we see this in the renewed interest in classical Greece and ancient Rome, evidenced with these roundels of Roman emperors. But in other ways, you have a typical, though very grand expression of medieval style, with this hammer beam roof in the Great Hall that includes painted heads known as the eavesdroppers. This was a place for feasting and entertainments like music and plays. The walls are decorated with tapestries commissioned by Henry VIII, depicting the life of the prophet Abraham, and this would have been the height of expense and good taste at the time. What I love about the Tudor Palace of Hampton Court are all these red brick passages that you can imagine courtiers and servants bustling around in at the time of the Tudors. These passages would have been places of intrigue and gossip as those around Henry VIII tried to figure out the latest whims of this most mercurial of monarchs. What way was he trending on religious matters? Whether he was still in love with his current wife? Who was going to be accused of treason next, sent to the Tower and then beheaded, whether the charge was true or not? And in the most hushed tones, was the king's health worsening or improving? All of which brings us to the kitchens, because if there's something Henry VIII was famous for, it was food and his legendary gluttony and girth. The diet of most people in Tudor England was protein deficient, to put it mildly, subsisting on porridges of vegetables and beans. By contrast, the royal court was awash with protein in the form of freshly slaughtered meat every day, and courtiers could hope to consume something like 5,000 calories daily. Meat dishes would include beef, lamb, venison, rabbit, swan and game. Much of it would come in the form of waistline-busting pies and a large variety of fish on top of that. Birds on the menu would have featured cocks, plovers and gulls. Henry VIII was keen to display his power and influence through food by ensuring that there were elements from around the globe, like spices from China, Africa and the Indies, as well as almonds and olive oil from the Mediterranean. These were all luxuries at the time. And all of this washed down with beer and wine. But now we depart Henry VIII's Hampton Court Palace to that of the joint monarchs King William III and Mary II nearly 150 years later. William commissioned the greatest architect of the age, Sir Christopher Wren, to demolish Henry's palace and build him something more fashionable, less of the red brick and twiddly chimneys and more of the grandiose Baroque style so fashionable in France. William wanted to emulate the stunning new palace at Versailles being built by the French King Louis XIV. Henry VIII's palace was now an outdated embarrassment, so his state apartments and much of the Hampton Court that he knew were destroyed. But for a variety of reasons, the demolition of the old palace was never completed. So we're left with a Tudor palace and a Baroque palace bolted onto each other. In 1986, fire swept through part of the Wren Palace, but mercifully most of it was saved. If the newer palace of King William looks familiar, that's because it and the formal gardens featured in the Netflix hit series Bridgerton. Hampton Court Palace today is one of the nation's favourite tourist attractions and a highly enjoyable and cultural day out, with some gorgeous architectural features and paintings to lose yourself in. As a sidebar, I once did an appearance on a TV show dressed as Henry VIII, but that's the closest I ever got to owning the place. And this is me, by the way, in 1970 as a small child visiting Hampton Court Palace, and me in the same place in 2022. I haven't aged a bit. So we must leave Hampton Court, but I urge you, if you are in London, take a trip out of town and come and visit it.